Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning, America. I'm Janet West, and I'd like to welcome you to the final day of the Broadcast Beat live shows from IBC 2014. We've had an exciting time. We've looked at 4K, we've looked at post-production and broadcasting, and today we're going to be looking at media asset management. Now, this show is being brought to you from the Teradek stand, and you can access the show by going into http://magazine.broadcastbeat.com, or you can go into tunein.com and just search for Broadcast Beat and you can hear the radio version. Don't forget to get a copy of the new digital magazine because it's full of all the latest products here at IBC and some interesting interviews. Now, as I said, we've covered some interesting topics and today is the final one. But these shows will be available very shortly on YouTube. I got an impressive lineup of guests today, as I've had for the last 3 days. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce them to you. First and foremost, to my right is Tony Taylor, CEO and Chairman of Transmedia Dynamics Limited. Now, Tony is the founder and has over 30 years experience in the IT and communications, broadcast and media sectors. He's negotiated and delivered long-term service and high-value contracts to many of the world's best-known organizations. He's a hands-on leader. He remains closely involved in scoping and delivering comprehensive asset management technology to various enterprises, such as Discovery at the National Film and Sound Archives of Australia. Tony is a well-known and respected speaker at many of the major broadcasting conferences, and his papers have included the importance of integrating media asset management and workflow processes. Next to Tony is Dave Headley. Now, Dave is marketing lead for MAM, but we're going to get onto that later. He doesn't like the word MAM. So MAM and Archive for Sony Professional Europe. He's been in the business over 30 years. We've got quite a few years amongst us here, guys. And he's worked in research and development in the early DVTR, high definition and software systems, been involved in systems integration and solutions delivery. Now, Dave is responsible for a diverse product set ranging from optical disc technology to an enterprise class integration and workflow platform. He joined Sony back in 1981, and he's built up a considerable expertise in AV and software systems, and he's worked in various senior management roles. Dave also has spoken a lot and given papers on high definition, systems integration and television video effects at SMPTE, the Royal Television Society, IEEE and NAB. He holds 18 patents in digital video effects and digital signal processing. Next to Dave, we have George Olver, founder of Movidiam. Have I said it correctly?
Movidiam, yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a groundbreaking new network that allows brands, agencies and filmmakers across the globe to connect, collaborate and create incredible films. Users build a profile for free to connect with the brands, agencies and filmmakers. So working collaboratively, they manage projects seamlessly and get paid securely. The result? We've got some inspiring films and the opportunity to contribute to the Movidiam global community of filmmakers. Now, George is a passionate filmmaker and producer and has won several international filmmaking awards, including the Sir Edmund Hillary Award. As a director of Pendragon Productions, which he founded in 2006, he's produced film campaigns across the globe for brands such as Google, Virgin, Samsung and Coca-Cola. He was the producer of the first independently produced documentary to be screened at the Odeon Leicester Square Cinema, Tenacity on the Tasman, a human-powered attempt to circumnavigate the world in a rowing boat. George is passionate about technology, as I think we all are, and its potential to change our modus operandi. A connected society is one of his go-to taglines, and he believes that through connecting and collaborating, the route to opportunity exists and work becomes easier and more streamlined. And then finally, I'd like to introduce you to Jeff Herzog, who is Product Manager at EditShare. And first of all, I've got to say congratulations, as EditShare actually got a Broadcast Beat Award.
It did, indeed.
Okay, and for the rest of the awards, do check out the magazine, broadcastbeat.com, to see who were the other winners. Now, Jeff told me earlier that he started working in an aquarium and has been an underwater cameraman. And he's been working in video, IT and software development for over 14 years. He currently manages EditShare's backup, archive and asset management products that form the core of EditShare's integrated end-to-end workflow. He first worked with EditShare as a customer while serving as a post-production supervisor on a History Channel series where he learned the value of shared storage. Earlier in his career, where he was learning HD post-production, he was at, as I said, New England Aquarium, where he was doing underwater shooting. Thank you, panel, and I'm delighted to have you here. Now, I'm hoping I'm going to learn something about media asset management in this session, but I'm going to start with you, Tony. If you check Broadcast Beat, you'll see an interesting article from Tony, where he said, the issues in media asset management have more to do with change and people management when implementing a solution. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think as we look around the show here at IBC and that, it's all about the technology. Well, a lot of the technology now is mature and is available out there, and I think when it comes to implementing things like media asset management, business process management, it's engaging with the people that are going to use it. It's more about what those people are going to do than it is about the technology that's used. Because implementing any solution, any IT-based solution, any broadcast-based solution, is no good unless you bring the people along with it. There's a reason for implementing it, and that's a business solution, not necessarily a technology reason. I have a view on the world which says pre the year 2000, the broadcast business was technology led, and I now believe that the broadcast business is technology enabled. We see it out there in the marketplace, so it's more about the people using the systems than it is about the technology itself. Okay, do you all agree on that? Or any comments?
I mean, I think absolutely. I mean, it's a key point, and I think looking at what Movidium's ambition is to collaborate and connect around the people. So it's the individuals and their individual skill sets which we're looking at, and 4K, 8K. There's a bit of a how much further can that go, and so I totally agree actually there, Tony. Yeah.
And I think from my perspective, one of the reasons I hate media asset management as a term is it means so many different things to so many different people. And everybody has an expectation of what it is. Unless you're managing that expectation and going into solving the problem that they're trying to fix, then you will never solve the problem. If you're just using the term media asset management, you'll get 10 different opinions from 5 different people.
Absolutely. I mean, I saw it yesterday on the stand. We were having a conversation with somebody, and they were turning around and using the terms media asset management, content management, digital asset management. And the first question I had is, what context in the business are you using that term for? And it's about the business process, it's not about the technology.
Well, I was going to ask this, is media, excuse my ignorance guys, but is media asset management the same as digital asset management? And are we really talking about fundamentally a library in the digital world?
For me, I think we're talking about business processes around the management of assets, whether they be media assets, digital assets. For instance, the archive organisations that we work with, and people like Discovery, they still have significant volumes of physical assets, media tape, videotape, film, and they want to digitise it into the digital form for preservation. So what do you call that? Do you call it library management, archive management, media asset management? The terms are so confusing, and they're confusing to the vendors. So if they're confusing to us, the customers are getting even more confused.
Well, to be honest, we've created that, because if you go back to NAB 3, 4, 5 years ago, everybody was a MAM vendor.
Exactly.
Everybody had a MAM system. And frankly, if you look at it, the most successful MAM systems were the ones that didn't call themselves MAM. They were news production, Avid Interplay, huge selling media asset management system, but they very rarely use the term media asset management. Playout systems, they've been in the industry now for 20, 30 years. They're very successful media asset management systems, but until 5 years ago, you never heard them being called a media asset management system. They had a problem, they fixed the problem, and that was it. And they understood what the customer's problem really was.
I think the key from my perspective, which is perhaps a little less industry than you two gents, is access. It's about access to the assets. And that's something that EditShare very much comes into the conversation as well. Inside the studio environment, how quickly can you get access? If you've got a timeline or pressure, you need quick visibility. So whatever the term for the management of the assets, it's about withdrawing into an edit, into broadcast, out to TX. So however that works, it's really, I think access is the key word with digital asset management. And I think, again, just looking from my experience, it's inside our project management tool with Movidium, it's quick access to call sheet information, tape information, Dropbox storage.
And the details matter too, I think. I mean, these people who are using our tools are living with them day in and day out. And intuitive tools, when we go to do an on-site commissioning, might spend a week at a customer site. Only a day of it is actually setup and configuration. The other 4 days, you hope, are spent with the customer and really learning what their workflow is, because the tools can do 20 different things, or you can do the same thing many different ways, but you really need to get down to what is the business case for that particular customer, and what's going to be the right way to get it done, and then lead them down the right path.
As you go around the show at IBC, I think the things for me that stand out, it's either 4K, cloud, or media asset management. So with all the different companies and vendors talking about media asset management, what are your main challenges? What are you facing with the current assets that your clients are dealing with?
I think formats is one huge challenge. I heard the term codec hamster wheel lately, which I kind of like. I think it really says it aptly. And all of us on the vendor side and on the customer side are trying to keep up with it, understand it, and make the right decisions in a constantly changing market. I think that's a huge challenge.
I would agree. I think formats and wrappers and all those other things, but I do think some of those challenges are starting to be addressed. You've got the DPP functionality in the UK now, with all the broadcasters taking DPP files. So whereas previously they would have a technical spec for a tape that got delivered, and if it wasn't delivered in that format, it would get sent back. With files, that has not been the case. So it's been an evolving market, but now with things like DPP, I think the challenge has been in one way resolved, because it's a standard format and a standard metadata schema across the content that's coming in. So I think we are starting to get through those challenges and starting to make it easier for our customers to work within the industry.
But DPP is UK centric. Is that not going to cause a problem with material coming in from the States or from Asia? Well, I've heard Hollywood doesn't yet fully understand DPP.
I think a lot of other European countries are looking at DPP just to watch for the success of it, and actually look at the problems that they have, and then when they implement, don't have the same problems. So I think that a lot of countries will be looking to take the learnings from that.
But I also think that if you look at what DPP is based on, it's based on the AMWA AS11 specification, which is a global specification. It just happens to be a different metadata spec within there. And we've already seen it. Some of our clients in the US are actually starting to look at the DPP and see how it's going. Let's face it, it only goes live in a couple of weeks. So they'll probably let
October 1st, I think,
October the 1st is when it's supposed to be going live, So I think we'll see those sort of things get rolled out globally.
I think one of the other big issues that we have in the industry is actually the diverse range of products that you actually have to integrate into a workflow. Because for me, media asset management, because it fixes a problem, the customer benefit is when they actually are reducing cost or actually doing something faster. And because we've got so many different products and customers buy completely different product sets and then integrate them into a workflow, a lot of media asset management systems become integration platforms and then have to build workflow engines on top of those. So actually for us, I think it's viewing it as more of an integration issue, looking at the workflow and the business processes and the benefits that customers are going to get from integrating those, and actually allowing them to make a good cost benefits analysis. Let's leave that one not integrated at the moment because it's going to be more expensive than doing this, and we'll get the benefit there. So a lot of customers are looking at real cost benefit analysis on individual parts of the workflow to see where they are going to make their money or actually make it easier for their operators.
Right.
And I think that actually brings another challenge really, is how do you get those metrics?
Yeah.
And that's where we're seeing a lot of our clients now turning around and saying we need to make sure that all of these workflows, all of these systems give us the metrics back on how long an ingest took or how long a file transfer took, not only for getting the cost benefit but also for scaling up their facility. If we look at the issue of online content, on-demand content, the explosion in that has meant that significant more transcoding power is required to get the same content out to the different platforms. So understanding the metrics, as you say, people need to understand what those metrics are to be able to make the decisions.
For the last sort of couple of years, we've been talking content anywhere, anyhow, on anything. We've got an enormous amount of content. Are we starting to create content faster than we can manage it? Or is getting an efficient asset management system the solution?
I think just dipping in there quickly, I think looking at where that content's coming from, and I think what we were discussing there is big industry, broadcast, TX, but there's a lot of prosumer, professional, single one-man shooters out there, the YouTube generation perhaps, and their workflows are very different, and I think that's where there's a massive explosion going on right now, and especially with the democratization in terms of the equipment, the quality going up, cost going down, there's all these suppliers around here, suddenly you're creating a generation of entrepreneurial filmmakers, and that has very, very different challenges. Perhaps again you probably see that in the edit share world with the workflow being very different to the traditional broadcast or the studio environment.
Absolutely, and we have to develop, we develop workflows that are vastly different for different types of customers. It's interesting at a show, customers coming up to me, I could be talking, broadcast and VDCP workflows, 1 hour, and a, small editing shared storage system, the next. There's such a wide range. I've never having the same conversation twice. There are themes throughout, but the details are so different every time, and I think flexibility in a system is key to being able to cater to those various demands. Also compression as well, as we see advancements in compression and how we can build algorithms which really do reduce file sizes, that's got to be a positive in terms of workflow bandwidth basically. So although it's not my area of absolute expertise. Yeah, it's interesting. Edit Share was all about centralization, sharing of media for a long time, and now we're kind of decentralizing it back on, this anywhere theme, access it anywhere on a tablet. So, I think it's this bifurcation too of codecs. You have the ultra high end with, 4K, and then the ultra low end, I need to be able to view my 4K anywhere on, a 3-inch screen, or now 6-inch screen.
But if we go back then to some comments that we were making earlier about the multitude of formats that the broadcasters and the content owners and that have to say, we then get with the content everywhere, we're talking about different formats for each of the devices. So you get Apple creating different format to Android, to set-top boxes, to PC, download to own, etc. So I think the issue being is in the answer to that is there needs to be a really good asset management system that is able to manage all those different formats as they get proliferate around the industry.
Or should we be looking for more standardization to minimize all this
if
stuff that doesn't work with it, everything else?
Well, if we can get all of the device manufacturers, Apple, Android, Google, etc., to do that, then that would be great. But it's being driven by the consumer with their demand on these new devices to actually drive that.
EditShare supports 4K formats. We also have to support GoPro because GoPro is going on CNN. Much worse stuff is going on television these days, and the standards have changed. And so professional workflows now have to bring in this very wide range of not only professional codecs but consumer codecs.
Absolutely. So there's the challenge with content everywhere, where we were trying to turn around and say we want standardized formats. It's expanding out even more.
Is it a question of innovation, or is it a question of getting the right heads together in the room?
The problem, I think, with getting the right heads together in the room, you start designing by committee,
right,
and you then don't get innovation. And that I think is one of the problems that we have in that area.
I think one of the big issues with media asset management systems is that there's a large-scale deployment. You build it, and then it's difficult to change it. It's difficult to change the workflows. It's more difficult to add in new devices. So actually, you're almost setting in stone what you're going to do. And then when you find that these new devices come along, you can't go in and change them easily, which is why you're seeing new technologies come in that is based on integration platforms rather than basically databases and standard just coded technology.
So what are the innovative technologies that we have today that are improving and making media asset management far more efficient?
I think...
And what's missing? Is there something that needs development?
I don't know. I'll go back to my very first point about the change. I actually believe the technology for efficient media asset management systems is there today and has been there for a few years now, and is right. I think the problem with this industry is it's been focused too much on the technology and not enough on the business of managing that media and the change management that you need, bringing those people in. We did a project with RTE in Ireland, and they were completely tape-based, but they really saw the benefit of changing their whole workflow environment to bring in a very comprehensive media asset management system. It's changed the whole of their working life, and I think that's where the industry needs to go, is more on the business than on the technology.
I think there's also the tools upstream of where this content is actually created. I mean, efficiency on production location. How can you not have vast amounts of raw footage which aren't ever touched or looked at? I mean, how do you streamline that process? With production notes or tools that are developed specifically to add some rigor to productions that might be all over the place.
But I think those tools are already there. You look at GoPro and you look at P2 cameras and that. It tracks, if you put all the metadata into it and you track it, that helps the media asset management downstream. So actually putting in it upstream is
you've got to have that integration.
Absolutely.
So I actually think one of the big innovations in the industry at the moment is FIMS. So we're actually starting to see some standard interfaces coming through, so that you have multiple vendors working with the same interface. Absolutely. So because we as an industry, we can't afford to keep developing new interfaces every time. We need to start using some standardization in that respect. We're not a big enough industry to the amount of development that goes on.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. Let's talk about people, clients, end users who want to have a media asset management system. You've got at the top end studios and broadcasters that have got hours and hours and decades of content, and yet you've got the smaller, those companies that are posting videos on YouTube or whatever. Give me some idea, what should those clients be thinking about if they're looking for a new asset management system?
I think it's a very interesting question, and I think the question is, are they looking, and do they realize they need one? And I think that's the really big issue. The social media generation, the ability, the quick access to content is really brands and businesses need to be producing a lot, and they don't have the internal infrastructure, many of them, and some of the surprisingly big ones, to administer the sort of prosumer single man shooter type work that is expected to come in for a trade show or some sort of event like that. So, I think an education thing is very, very necessary there.
Yeah, and I would say stop thinking about media asset management, because that's a technology.
Absolutely.
And it will drive you down the technology route. Business process, what does your business want to do? What are the business processes? What does that drive in terms of workflow? And then look at the integrations and the technology to support that.
Absolutely. Find the application.
Yeah.
Don't find the technology.
Yeah.
Once you found the
and actually
application.
get your operators in that process early enough.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that really understand how you run the business. Because actually, we've all got these workflow written down, but actually they never get implemented that way. They never really work that way.
Well, I also think that because again it's a people process with all these workflows. We did a consultancy exercise with one of our clients where we were designing their workflows, worked with them to design their workflows. We decided we'd go and walk the workflow the first day. Picked up the first tape which they wanted to ingest. It had a yellow post-it note with things written on it. So we said, where did that come from? And they said, oh yes, we forgot. That's the bit of metadata we use to track it there. So it's finding that information out to track it through those processes.
And if you don't get the people involved early enough, what we've found is we've implemented systems where there's quite a lot of automation, because that's what people think is going to save them money. But then as you start to run this, you find all of the places where you can't automate it, and you end up backing out the automation back to some of the manual processes, because it's the people that make the decisions on what they have to do with that material at that time.
So what I'm hearing is that customers really almost looking at the technology first before they are thinking about the business. So I guess it's up to you guys to start pushing business applications for assets. Yeah.
I often have to back the conversation back. They come thinking they know what they want. And we have to say, well, what are you really trying to achieve here? And then we'll deploy the technology. But I think you're absolutely right that it's got to come with what's the underlying.
What's the problem?
What's the problem?
What are you trying to fix?
And then we know all the details of our software and how it works, and we can recommend it, and which tool. I think also scalability and flexibility as well, because many of these projects, especially larger ones, have long lead times, and the requirements and the state of the industry may have changed by the time you deploy that system. So you want a system that can bridge the gap to whatever the next thing is, and it's flexible enough.
I think as well, businesses and brands, they create and produce content, and 3 months later they need to revisit that content, reversion it, transcreate it, relanguage it, and again, access to that file, visibility on where it is, visibility on the various layers of the edit. It's a key thing, and I think again, businesses, big ones, really do struggle with some of those processes. I mean, they kind of focus on let's do our big ad and let's not worry about all the sub layers, which are increasingly as important as that big ad.
Okay. Are program makers and broadcasters and the like at the higher end missing the boat when it comes to social media as far as their assets? Are they missing some revenue streams, and are there some revenue streams that are to be had?
I think your second question there is actually the most pertinent one. Are there any revenue streams to be had from content on social media? I know our customers have been looking at it, and some of the new on-demand channels and new VOD channels and OTT channels, there is little or no revenue generation from those channels. So how do they monetize that content that's going to go out onto it? So I think that the broadcasters, the production companies, etc., are in a challenging environment of how do they get revenue for that content that's going out there.
Yeah.
I have to reference an American guy called Gary Vaynerchuk here, with a book called Jab Jab Right Hook, and it's his process is with social media. It's very iterative. You've got to touch the customer once or twice with social media before you try and sell something, and I think that's that's always been the case perhaps, and although it's less sort of visible in the sort of real world environment, but creating little bits of content, keep regular updates, etc., and then the sale will come later. And I think that's I think he's a very, very successful example of someone who's is, advising people how to create and use content, but also doing it extremely well for his own social media purposes. And that, I think that's the perspective on that.
Yeah.
Is it at the search, logging, ingest stage, or other stages where we do need the most improvement? Is there one particular area?
I would say, and I'll go back to it, and I suppose for fear of repeating myself, I think it's understanding the business processes across the entire chain. As Dave said, the integration of some of the technologies in the process. So I'm not sure there is a single area within the workflow that needs to be focused on more than anything else. I think it's the whole change management, people management, right across the process.
I think it was said earlier, all of this metadata is created, and you then put it onto a file, and you lose it, and then somebody has to then look at the file and go, okay, that was that date, this was it. You actually have to, once you've created it, actually keep it. But we actually end up throwing away and recreating data about the files every time they move the process.
And one of the areas that we looked at with another customer is, prior to putting a media asset management system in, they entered the title of an acquired program into 34 separate systems throughout the content chain. So it's that sort of thing, it's that business process that gets enhanced as you move it through the chain.
And it probably makes more sense to fix that,
yes,
in terms of a business benefit, than actually putting any more complicated processes in. So it is a case of really focusing on where you need to put the metadata, where you need to put the fix. And again, we tend to go, right, well, we need these wonderful cataloging tools, we need these wonderful viewing tools. That's probably not where the main fix is required.
Okay. Any comments there?
Yeah, well, I agree.
Okay, let's talk about technology in delivery. You've got your asset management. The metadata enables you to find out where everything is. What ways should we be delivering that content to the various clients of that particular company? Should we be using satellite? Should we be using the internet? How should we be delivering that when we're dealing in a global marketplace?
I think that really depends on what you're trying to deliver and essentially who you're trying to deliver it to. If you're trying to deliver it to a multitude of people, then you've got satellite technology, sends it up to the bird, down to thousands, millions of people, if that's what you're trying to achieve. But the internet now, with multicasting and all those sort of technologies, allows the same sort of thing to be happening over the internet. Internet has got a finite bandwidth and therefore can restrict it. But I think you have to look at what you're trying to achieve, and it's back to the business process. What are you trying to achieve? Rather than looking at the technology, look at what the business is that you're trying to get to.
Is there one system which is going to be better for our environment than the other? And are there technologies which are favouring the environment versus then destroying the environment? I mean, Dave, you and I have talked about optical disc, for example.
Yeah, I think the advantage of optical disc is it doesn't need air conditioning, it doesn't need humidity control, and that's a fairly big, expensive process. If you look at all of the archives around the world, the amount of them that are actually temperature controlled, humidity controlled, that's a lot of power. I actually tend to view data centers and cloud as being a major benefit. I know they've got a lot of bad press at the moment, but actually if you try and imagine a lot of customers setting up their own areas and then setting up their own N+1 resilience on that, there's a lot more computing power and a lot more wastage on that if you actually centralize it than if you centralize it.
But what I would say to that, and I haven't got the answer, but what I would say to that is, okay, you're centralizing that content into the cloud, but the users are remote, and therefore you need more routers, more network infrastructure, so you've got more power going into that. So I haven't done the figures, and I've no idea what the figures are, but I think I think what we've got to do as an industry, as a world, if you like, is work out the best way to manage that power consumption.
Yeah.
I think we have to push the larger vendors, hard drive manufacturers, chassis, fan manufacturers, whoever it is. We need to, do a census of the power load that we're creating and push the big manufacturers into a sustainable direction. Because it's hard for smaller companies to influence that. We're not going to invent our own hard drive, right? As much as we'd like to. We've experimented with green drives in the past, but you have to balance performance, reliability, and power, of course. And if there's a technology out there that's reliable, we'd be, the first that would decrease power consumption. We'd be the first in line for it. But I think it has to happen on a big scale.
And we also have to understand the usage of the material, because there are different hierarchical storage requirements, but nobody likes to lose it from the online disk. You have to kind of automate it based on some knowledge of when that material is going to get used. And frankly, if you put it on the shelf and you need it, you have to go and get it off the shelf. But you just can't afford to keep all of this stuff offline, because nobody deletes anything anymore.
And I think the other thing is, we talk about the performance, etc. As the technology and performance goes up, so the heat ramps up, so you need more cooling power, more fans. So I think it's the consumers and the consumption and the internet is driving power, significant lot of power out there in the marketplace. I don't have the answer, as I say, but I think as an industry we really have to manage that.
Right.
It's funny how we've come full circle from taking a videotape out, putting it on the shelf. Now we're taking our LTO tapes out, optical discs out, and putting them on the shelf.
Absolutely.
There certainly is a model for it. It's maybe not ideal. Everyone does want everything online all the time, but maybe you can't have it.
It's just not practical. I run out of disk space on my home computer, so everything's on optical disc. Right? Okay, I need to pull it back from Blu-ray. Go and find it.
Excited about these scalable tape libraries we have that let small companies start with an 80 slot unit and then expand it up to 540 slots. Well, for many organizations, that's a fair bit of storage. That's a couple petabytes of storage that is still accessible enough that you're not grabbing it on a shelf. It is in the library. The robot's grabbing it.
And that's 60,000 hours at 50 megabits. That's a lot of content.
Well, we talk about that. You look at what happened in the late 90s, early 2000s. Everybody turned around and said, tape's dead, we'll never need physical asset management, library management again. We're now in the process of data tapes. Absolutely, major libraries. So that power consumption in those libraries is the same as what it was in the videotape libraries.
Dave brought up an interesting point. We don't throw anything out. Now, if you think in the old days, we used to have our photographs, and perhaps every once in a while we'd go through the album, there's a picture of a flower. Where was that? Throw it out. Should we start looking at our assets rather than keeping everything? I was talking to some people at Hewlett-Packard recently. They're now actually going to be training their staff. You don't have to keep everything on your computer. You can actually throw stuff away that you will never ever use again. Obviously news items and some really valued content, you're never going to consider that, but is there content that customers that have large libraries of content should start thinking about, hang on guys, we can reduce our storage because reducing cost, and that's reducing environmental impact?
I think that the cloud marketing campaign has meant that people think it's a bottomless pit. You just toss it into it and it has zero cost, because there is seemingly such small, incremental, minuscule incremental cost to saving that additional JPEG. How do you measure that? But in the aggregate, we're creating something that's really takes quite a lot of power and resources. I think to sustain.
There's no such place as away. Throw it away. and I think that's the issue. And I think in all walks of digital life, there's quite a impact, and you're very inundated by things. I mean, we've all opened multiple browser windows, and by the end of your day, you're exhausted with that sort of huge impact. And again, that's just me, one little man in London, and obviously at scale, that's a big issue. There's no such place as away. and
I think that's where content management system. I'm trying not to use the word media asset management because I don't like it either,
Dave,
Dave. I can tell you I hate that.
It's been a long-running conversation, I think, this one. Long-running banter.
But it's different people use different terms for it. But anyway, it's about when you've got a system that is managing your media, then you can put the policies and processes in place that will allow you to throw things away based on automated rules. It may be we haven't accessed this for 10 years and the metadata has shown that. So are we ever going to access it? The downside of that is when you start looking at things like happened with the BBC in the 60s and that, where they threw content away that became very valuable.
Steptoe and Son.
Exactly. So how do you manage that value proposition, that value chain, if you like, in knowing what is going to be valuable today or valuable in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years? And I think that's the problem.
But you can't.
Absolutely.
And I think you have to accept you can't.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting. I know archivists get a lot of bad press because they get viewed as the people who are collecting everything. But actually, they're the smartest people I know in terms of saying, actually, that looks like stuff we should keep. No, we're going to throw that away. And they do actively make throwaway decisions when they're putting stuff into the archive.
Well,
and as far as I can
the
see,
collection.
absolutely, yeah. And that's what a skill we've lost, except down in that final, things get thrown to them. Thrown over the wall, right, this is something we need to archive. And they actively look at it and say, no, I don't think so. We don't need that. That's really important. We'll keep that, and we'll catalogue it properly. We'll make sure it's findable. We'll make sure you can save it and preserve it. And they're the best people I know for actually making that decision. Because everybody else has a vested interest in the content they've created.
Absolutely.
Whether it's
if you've walked up the hill, to film something, you're going to try and pick the shot because you remember how much work it was to crawl up the hill. And I think that's a very interesting point in terms of, like, say you do 10 takes of something, but 8 of them are probably never going to be used because screwed up, or 2 of them potentially are. And I think that's a very valid point, how you can fix it upstream.
Yeah. And you say even, oh, well, it's just a $50 LTO tape, but then you do have to keep migrating it as well. So
exactly.
Nothing's free.
Yeah.
And it sits on a shelf, and it's it's in a building somewhere in a high, it's in London, it's in Madrid, it's in Tokyo, or exactly.
And I think that's where people's, if you like, personal lives move into their work life, because people at home, they've got a computer, they save everything, they keep everything, and they transfer that into the work environment as well. So they just keep saving things and that. So I think that's one of the challenges.
But I think George had a point. Just the digital world means that there's this bottomless pit or whatever of
well, that's what people think. That's what people think.
But there actually isn't a bottomless pit. Don't forget, you can look at Broadcast Beat for all the latest on media asset management, as well as other innovations in production, post-production, and all studio environments. Sort of wrapping up, have we moved on a lot since NAB? Is there anything really new at the show that can be your own company or other companies that you've seen relating to media asset management?
I think certainly with Movidium.com, this is a very innovative project. I mean, we are looking to create a network of cameramen, directors, producers, to create a social network for them, and then offer them the project management tools to be able to run and streamline that production process. Now, whether that has an impact on the digital asset management or content management process, yes, I think it does, because if you're streamlining the process upstream and things are more efficient, there's perhaps less data captured because of the efficiency, and before that comes to perhaps your part of the process. And I think that certainly is a very innovative platform there, in a pre-registration phase for engaged filmmakers to register with. Okay,
Jeff, what do you think there is at the show and that's moved on since NAB?
Well, over the last couple NABs and IBCs, you see just everybody advertising themselves with an end-to-end workflow and media asset management and tiered storage. You just can't look around another booth, at least in our hall, without seeing that. EditShare has been doing that for a long time, there is variety out there in the industry, and different systems are better or worse for different people. So there are a lot of systems out there, but you really have to have an in-depth conversation with the vendor to figure out which one is going to be
and
right
figure out
you.
what the business proposition is,
exactly.
as we talked
Come to
about
us
earlier.
with the business proposition, and then we will lead you to the right answer.
Right.
Yeah.
Dave, as far as Sony, have you got offering something new on media asset management this show?
I think in terms of media asset management, it's the integration platform, and optical discs has now moved on to the library. So we've got libraries that will hold 30,000 hours of storage, and then you put the material on the shelf. And the commitment to backward compatibility to make sure that you don't actually have to copy it every time.
Right. Tony, something caught your eye?
I think one of the biggest things that we're seeing around the media asset management arena is that of metadata is king. You said about the upstream processes and capturing the right metadata, and I think that is absolutely crucial to the efficiencies in the workflow. So within our product MediaFlex, we've implemented something called content intelligence, which basically means the business process management will look at the metadata within the files themselves or within the database and make intelligent decisions, orchestrated and automated decisions, as to how it processes that workflow. That has the benefits of efficiency, removing human interaction in some places where appropriate, because it's not always appropriate to remove that human interaction, and giving our customers and other people the basis for delivering more content out to more platforms, because you've got to create 8 formats. So I think metadata management and content intelligence is a significant part for us. As far as other vendors are concerned in the show, I mean, 4K is huge in the show.
Yep.
Is it right? Are people going to go out there?
That's another session.
But it's there. So we're talking about content management in a 4K environment, 8K environment. So I think that's where we are.
On that note, I'd like to thank you, gentlemen. George Herzog from EditShare, and once again, congratulations on the Broadcast Speed Award. George from Movidiam, Dave Headley from Sony, and Tony from TMD. I'm Janet West, and on behalf of Broadcast Beat, I'd like to thank you for watching and joining me for the last 4 days. These videos will be posted, and you'll be able to get the link on Broadcast Beat to see where it is. I hope you've enjoyed watching us at IBC. Check out the magazine to keep up to date, and we look forward to seeing you at the next show. Goodbye.